Did you know the basilisk actually makes an appearance in the Goblet of Fire movie? Or did you know one of the sets of twins that we see in the movies aren't actually related at all? Today we're going to talk about 30 different fun facts within Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire that you may not know. So I'm sure one of you is going to be like, I know every single one of these, and that's awesome. But there were some in here that I didn't even know, and I do research on fun facts for videos. So the fact that there were some that I had never heard of before was cool. I'm glad to find things that I don't know. So make sure to stick around. You might find something that you actually didn't know. You know the basilisk, you know, the giant snake that lived in a secret cavern beneath the school. Yeah, it's in the fourth movie. You probably never even knew this, but the animatronic that they used for the basilisk in the second movie to make it more realistic was repurposed and was used for the fire-breathing dragon scenes when Hagrid shows Harry what is in the first task. I would have never noticed because it's dark, so of course you're not going to really be like, oh yeah, is that the basilisk? Of course you're not going to notice. But they did reuse the basilisk. At least they saved something from that because they had to rebuild the set for Chamber of Secrets in the later movies. Remember Alfonso Cuarón, the director of Prisoner of Azkaban? Well, he was asked to come back to direct Goblet of Fire. And he was all for it. He was like, yeah, that sounds great, but I gotta finish the movie I'm doing right now. And of course, Warner Brothers was like, nah, we gotta get this movie out. Like, you know, we are on a time schedule. These kids aren't gonna get any younger. And so he had to step back and a new director took his place. Director Mike Newell. Mike Newell, the director of Goblet of Fire, was paid significantly less than the previous director, Chris Columbus, on the set of Harry Potter as director, where Chris Columbus was paid $10 million per movie, as well as getting a percentage of the box office revenue. Mike Newell only got $1 million. There are many reasons behind this. Chris Columbus was a larger director, more well-known, needed to get the franchise off the ground. Mike Newell, not as much, but also they had to start paying the actors a little bit more. So, you know, the budget had to come out of somebody's pocket. Draco Malfoy wasn't the highest paid actor on that set based on his time for no reason. Warner Brothers Studios actually wanted Goblet of Fire to be in two parts. I agree with them. Granted, they probably wanted it for, hey, more box office revenue, but Alfonso Cuarón, the director of Prisoner of Azkaban, talked Mike Newell, the director of Goblet of Fire, into telling the studios that it should only be one part, which probably was a good idea for Mike Newell since this was the only movie he directed, but also not a great idea for the movie because there were so many cuts that were made in this movie. On the set of Goblet of Fire, Mike Newell did have a couple problems. One of them being that he may have accidentally insulted Alan Rickman. Alan Rickman wore colored contacts as Snape, and Mike Newell on the first day on set looked at him and said, I love the shade of your eyes. That's so cool. And Alan Rickman reached up to his eye and took out his contact and said, thanks. So good start on you, Mike Newell. It's probably a good thing that you didn't split the movie into two parts. Since most of the cast of Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire were younger, Mike Newell was trying to make a connection with them, but it really never stuck. They always liked to call him Sir, and he didn't like being called Sir. So to try to break that tension between them, he started a fake fight with one of the Weasley twins, also to help them practice with their fight scene that they had in the middle of the movie, but it got a little out of hand and Mike Newell broke a rib cast. But I think he might have gained some respect from the younger cast. The director of Goblet of Fire wasn't the only one who felt as though he wasn't getting paid enough. The Dursleys also thought they should have been paid a little bit more. So when they went to the studio to ask for more money, of course the studio obliged and cut them fully out of the movie. So you went from some money to no money because you were greedy, which kind of suits the Dursleys a little bit. We want more money. No. Another actor who was cut from Goblet of Fire was Percy Weasley, played by Chris Rankin. But unlike the Dursleys, he wasn't cut because he wanted more money. He was cut because of his contract. So Percy Weasley, or Chris Rankin, was only contracted for 4 movies. And so he had to make a decision, since he had already been in the first 3 movies, he had to make a decision on whether he wanted to be in the 4th movie or the 5th movie. Ultimately, he decided to be in the 5th movie because he felt that that part was much bigger than the part that they were giving him in Goblet of Fire. And the way that they treated Barty Crouch and Barty Crouch Jr.'s storyline in the 4th movie, it was probably a better choice for Percy to be in the 5th, which was still a relatively small role compared to how he is in the books. Mike Newell, the director of Goblet of Fire, really wanted to give the movie a new feel. And of course, Alfonso Cuarón kind of set up this whole idea of it getting darker and darker with each movie. And so Mike Newell tried to stick with that, but also wanted to give it a Bollywood feel. Granted, we didn't have any musical dance numbers, which is kind of unfortunate. We did have a small one during the Yule Ball, but it's not the same as the fun, colorful, festive Bollywood dance numbers that are in Bollywood movies. But his influence of Bollywood did kind of show up throughout the movie with the use of bright, vibrant colors contrasting against the dark, brooding background that was Goblet of Fire. And on the topic of dance numbers, the dance numbers that we do get in Goblet of Fire, which is the main champion's dance, everybody else had about 3 weeks to learn that dance except for Daniel Radcliffe because he was busy filming the movie. He only had about 4 days, and it kind of helped for the ultimate ending of that scene where he doesn't know what's going on and everybody else seems to know how to dance properly. So it kind of works really well that he legitimately didn't know how to do the dance as well as everybody else. And that's part of the reason why you never see Daniel Radcliffe's legs in that scene, because he didn't know the steps very well. When Harry goes to the Yule Ball, we all know his date are the Patil twins. Him and Ron go with the Patils. But are they actually twins? Because they're not actually related whatsoever. They are just two girls that look very similar, but are not related whatsoever. It's kind of like Fred and George Weasley. They met at auditions. That's a joke that they played in an interview that somebody actually fell for, but the Patil twins actually weren't related at all. Kind of a good find, because I would have believed it if you told me they were related. Harry wanted to go to the Yule Ball with Cho Chang, but Cho Chang may not have been the Cho Chang that we thought that she was going to be. Katie Long actually wasn't planning on auditioning for Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. She was actually on a shopping trip when her father called her and said, "Hey, they're doing auditions in the area that you're at. You should go try out and see if you can get a part." And lo and behold, she did become Cho Chang, but only by happenstance. She wasn't planning on being Cho Chang, just like she wasn't planning on going to the Yule Ball with Harry. So in Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, during the Yule Ball scene, the band that is playing throughout the Yule Ball is the Weird Sisters. Well, since the Weird Sisters don't actually exist, the filmmakers had to find a good replacement. So what better to replace the Weird Sisters than famous British band Pulp and Radiohead? So from Pulp, you had Jarvis Cocker, and from Radiohead, you had Johnny Greenwood and Phil Selway. So it may not have been the Weird Sisters, but it was a good combination of good bands. The lead costume designer of Goblet of Fire, Janie Tamaim, really wanted Hermione to have her Cinderella moment. As she comes down the stairs, she wanted just that perfect princess moment for Emma Watson to happen. And of course, it did happen, but it took many different dresses to get to that point. So many different changes, because those of us who read the book know that the dress was supposed to be powder blue. Ultimately, it was a pink peachy color. But the costume designer wanted to make sure that the color didn't wash out Emma Watson's skin tone. So of course, the color did have to change to make sure that it worked well with Emma Watson. Although Emma Watson did get her Cinderella moment during the Yule Ball scene, though, it wasn't perfectly filmed at first. The first time that she went down the stairs in her Yule Ball gown, she actually ended up tripping and falling down the stairs, which is unfortunate, but at least she was all right and she was fine to go down the stairs afterward. But at least Emma Watson did get her princess moment during that film, and then eventually got another princess moment because she is, in fact, a Disney princess. Now, while we're on the topic of Hermione, during the Yule Ball scene in the book, there's a small conversation between Hermione and Victor Crumb about how to pronounce her name. It was speculated for years that this was put in by the author to help the readers pronounce Hermione's name right, because I know it may just be me, but I always pronounced her Hermione, and I always knew that was wrong, but it was the easiest way for me to get through without trying to stumble through the name and change it every time, so I called her Hermione, until we get to Goblet of Fire, where she breaks down the pronunciations to Hermione, and then from then on, readers were able to pronounce her name properly. Of course, this scene's not in the movie, because we've heard her name many times being screamed by Harry and Ron for 3 movies before this. It was then later confirmed by J.K. Rowling that that is exactly what she meant to do by that little section in there, was to help readers of a younger age be able to pronounce a very difficult name. On the topic of pronunciation, if you had actually listened to the book instead of read the book, you would have never had a problem with how to pronounce Hermione's name, because Jim Dale read the book phenomenally. He did it so well that he actually broke a record on how many different voices he did during the recording of Goblet of Fire. There are so many different characters within that book, and every single one of those characters had a different voice, which is a huge deal because he was able to do a different voice for so many different characters that most people usually mess up and do the same voice for like half the characters. It's a testament to Jim Dale's talent that he was actually able to do that in the book. I'm partial to Jim Dale reading the audiobook. I do enjoy Stephen Fry occasionally, but my main listen will always be Jim Dale reading Harry Potter. The first and third task of the Triwizard Tournament are the more memorable tasks within the movie of Goblet of Fire. But the second task was one of the harder ones to film because it had to be filmed underwater. And it wasn't just a quick, hey, let's just jump in the water today and film. Daniel Radcliffe spent 41 total hours filming underwater for the second task scene. Ultimately, he ended up with 2 ear infections, and most days only got like 7 to 8 seconds of usable footage. But in the end, it really kind of worked out to look great as a scene for a movie. Being that the second task was such an undertaking to film, they had to build a 500,000 liter tank to be able to build the set for the second task. It's one of the largest underwater sets to be built beside James Cameron's 26 million liter tank that he used for The Abyss. But The Abyss had its own problems when it came to filming, and I think the 500,000 liter tank was big enough. Being underwater has a lot of safety concerns, especially when you have to dive pretty deep into the bottom of the tank to be able to film. They did have breathing apparatuses just off camera to allow the actors to be able to stay underwater for longer periods of time and allow them to stay in that spot between scenes. But there were signals that Daniel Radcliffe was supposed to give if he was okay. And at one point he didn't give the signal to say that he was okay, which activated the dive team to have to dive down and pull him out of the water and basically disrupt filming for the rest of that day because, oh, well, you took him out of position. Now we've got to refilm the whole thing. No wonder it took 41 hours to film. While we're on the topic of the second task, Harry got the gillyweed in both the movie and the book to allow him to swim underwater. But in the movie, it was given to him by Neville Longbottom. In the book, it was given to him by Dobby. But unfortunately, Dobby and the entire house elf plot from Goblet of Fire had to be removed from the movie to save time. The movie was already long enough and a little bit high in budget. So of course, multiple CGI characters, which would have been involved if you did the house elf storyline, would have made it even more expensive and taken up a lot more time to be able to film as well as edit. But if you watch carefully within Goblet of Fire during the Quidditch World Cup scene before, when they're at the campsite, you'll see a llama. And on that llama, you'll see 2 house elves. Coincidentally, both of those house elves kind of fit the description of both Dobby and Winky, the 2 main house elves within the story of Goblet of Fire. So at least they did a subtle nod to, hey, we see you, book readers, but unfortunately we're not going to continue the story in the movie series. Other major changes within Goblet of Fire another major change within Goblet of Fire is Voldemort. Within the books, he's described to have red eyes that are more slit-like, reminiscent to a snake or a serpent. But Ralph Fiennes, the actor who played Voldemort, went to the filmmakers and said, I don't like this. I can't really emote and show my emotion when I'm covered with so much prosthetics. Can you leave my eyes open and allow me to be able to emote using my eyes? And the filmmakers were like, yeah, let's see how that works. And of course, it ended up staying in. And I think Ralph Fiennes did a great job as being a creepy Voldemort. He's got big shoes to fill, that's for sure. Not that he wore shoes, but you know what I mean. The set of Dumbledore's office we already know is an extremely expensive set. It was one of the most expensive sets that was built for Prisoner of Azkaban. So one of the things they did to save a little bit of money was instead of buying a bunch of old giant leather bound books, is they used phone books and then just glued bindings on the back of them to make them look like old leather bound books. Because you don't need to see the books. Harry never takes the books out, neither does Dumbledore. So it's not a big deal to use giant phone books all over the room to represent old tomes. And if they saved so much money using phone books, what did they use all the money for in Dumbledore's office set? The Icelandic nation had a good laugh when watching Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire because one of the characters, specifically Rita Skeeter, her last name meant shit. Specifically, the word skita means shit in the Icelandic language. And if a British person says Rita Skeeter, it sounds like Rita Skeeta, which sounds like the Icelandic word for shit, which is fitting for Rita Skeeter because she kind of is. As with most books Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire wasn't originally going to be called Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. It went through many name changes, one of them being Harry Potter and the Triwizard Tournament. But the author thought that that's a little too on the nose on what is going to happen in the book. So instead, she decided to change it to Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire so that it was a little bit more mysterious, which I think worked. When I first opened that book, I was like, ooh, what is the Goblet of Fire? You had the Sorcerer's Stone, the Chamber of Secrets, the Prisoner of Azkaban. Now you have the Goblet of Fire. It's going to be a big MacGuffin throughout the book. Nope, it's actually just in like the 6th chapter of the book. Oh, okay, cool. Goblet of Fire director Mike Newell really wanted the Dark Mark to be vicious looking. He wanted it to stand out and just look almost painful for the Death Eaters. So what he imagined the Dark Mark doing is when it showed up on the Death Eater skin, it kind of bubbled out of their skin, which took a lot of work to make practically work. And the makeup artists were able to do it by darkening the Dark Mark in multiple stages. And then eventually they had to use CGI to make the snake move out of the skull because they can't do that practically. And it did really well to make it look painful to have a dark mark. And because Goblet of Fire was so dark compared to the previous movies, this is the first movie in the series to go from a PG rating to a PG-13 rating. But it wasn't just because it was a darker movie. They wanted it to be less of a kid's movie and grow with the audience. Because, of course, the audience that grew up with Sorcerer's Stone and Chamber of Secrets is now a lot older by the time the 4th movie came around. So, of course, they need it to be a little bit more adult. The audience of the Harry Potter series was not the only group that was aging before people's eyes. Actor Daniel Radcliffe actually just changed drastically between the beginning of filming and the end of filming of Goblet of Fire. The director Mike Newell said from when he was editing, there would be scenes where he would see the young Daniel Radcliffe who looked like the Harry Potter from the first 3 movies. And then there were other scenes where he was almost unrecognizable as that same child because he looked like an adult. But that's what happens when you film children. They change drastically. Michael Gambon, who played Albus Dumbledore from Prisoner of Azkaban on, used to wear his street clothes underneath his robes. And not only that, he used to keep a pack of smokes in his sock, so in between scenes, he could take a smoke break. Well, maybe that's why he yelled at Harry about putting his name in the Goblet of Fire. He just needed a smoke. Maybe give him a smoke and let's retry that scene. Because we don't need to yell at Harry. Harry, did you put your name in the Goblet of Fire? That's all you have to do. That's all you have to do. All right, that is all of the facts for today. Did you know every single one of them? Because I know there were a couple that when I did research for this, I had never seen before, and I was excited to learn some new stuff about behind the scenes of the Harry Potter series. So hopefully you enjoy that too, and if you do, make sure to like and subscribe so you can get more Harry Potter behind the scenes and discussions that I'll be posting here weekly. So without further ado, stay marvelous, Nox.